everyone to our very first session of 2023. I can see that I have got a double. Diana is in
I'm just doing it.
the room as Barbara Isaacs. I am not quite sure how that happened, but welcome, Diana. I apologize for slightly delayed beginning because we have been waiting for Diana to appear in the list of participants, and here she is. So what a relief. Otherwise, I would have had to ad-lib for a significant period of time, which is not so good. We are delighted to have Diana with us. She has been working with the coaching program for several years now, and there are some really wonderful pieces of information, wonderful pieces to be shared of advice. And I'm particularly happy because this is the first opportunity we have had to collaborate directly with the Montessori Society in the UK. For those of you who don't know, the Montessori Society for the UK is currently the only really functioning association for graduates and members, and they offer a variety of professional development courses for their members, and they are very open to having new members. So if you are wanting to work with other organizations, please connect with Diana and she will tell you all about it. But let us begin. I will hand over to Diana. Would you like to say a few words about yourself and then start? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much for the invitation to share what we're doing over at the Society. And thank you all for the warm welcome. And it's lovely to see so many faces. A lot of your faces are new to me, and I do appreciate you all coming out this evening. Okay, we'll get straight into it. Oh, and before I forget, I want to give a big shout out to Gwendolyn for her help this evening as well. So if we can go to the first slide, please, Gwendolyn. Empowering your team to grow. So that's the title we're going to hold in our minds this evening. We're going to grab power wherever we can. So this evening I'd like to share a little bit about the transformative power of Montessori coaching with you. I have brought along one of the coaching tools, which you'll see later. And also, I'm just going to float a new idea for the initials IC in Montessori. Next slide, please, Gwendolyn. So I'd like to start with a reminder of two fundamentals that Dr. Montessori gave us to support children. Share your work, and only work can fix deviation. Both of these concepts are true for adults as well. Are you a bored and frustrated assistant? Or a stressed and overworked guide? These are deviations from having a rewarding occupation. If you're neither of those, you will want to start to ensure that you are maintaining a normalized atmosphere in your setting. And of course, normalized is different for everyone. So this evening's talk is really about self-care and constructing spaces for our minds to grow. Next slide, please. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. That's so simple, isn't it? And I really like this quote because to me, it speaks of forgiveness. The work we do is explorative, experimental, and can be exhausting. But if you're committed to doing it well, then you'll have some moments when you'll wish you hadn't done that. Now, I'm not about to share any of my moments, but I will say that without forgiveness for yourself and for others, it can be difficult to do better. Next slide, please. Elizabeth Slade, who leads the Montessori coaching course for us, she does this great thing on each of the courses, and that she asks participants, something that she asks participants to do that we all invariably stumble over. And I've put it down to the fact that it's because it comes from a part of our brain that we don't use very often. And that is to put ourselves before the children. So for example, she will ask us to read a quote, much like this one. We insist that a teacher must prepare himself interiorly by systematically studying himself so that he can, oh, I'll stop there, because what Elizabeth always asks us to do when we're reading the quotes is to exchange the word teacher for coach and the word child for teacher. We insist that a coach must prepare himself interiorly by systematically studying himself so that he can tear out his most deeply rooted defects. Those, in fact, which impede his relations with teachers. In order to discover these subconscious failings, we have need of a special kind of instruction. We must see ourselves as another sees us. We must be willing to accept guidance if we wish to become effective coaches. The coaching course offers lots of other tools like this strategy for empowerment. You name a problem and there's a tool for it. This evening, I wanted to apply the lesson study protocol tool to the issue of staff deployment in the classroom. Perhaps you work in a system where each adult, teachers and assistants give presentations to their key children. Or maybe you work in a system where only the diploma holding lead gives presentations to the children. The rest of the team protect the lead space by supporting or redirecting the other children so that each child may have uninterrupted time with the lead. Whichever system is used, there has to be consistency across the setting so that the quality of education remains good for all children at all times. It's pleasing when the children give presentations to one another. It means we have been respecting the gifts, as Dr. Montessori calls them, the gifts of the first plane, and providing the children with the freedom to develop the confidence to teach. But Dr. Montessori's idea that everyone in the classroom can teach extends to the adults as well as the children. If we're paying attention to the mind of the child, then we know they are learning even when we're not teaching. So what effect do our systems or hierarchies have on the children? What messages are being transmitted through our systems? Next slide, please. If a classroom assistant can read and sing with children, do you not think they can also do 3-period lessons? I know we are led to believe that only the trained teacher can give these lessons. Perhaps some topics, yes. However, if you have children under 3.5 years old needing lots of vocabulary lessons every day, will you have time to do all of them? If not, who will? I am a firm believer that every classroom assistant should be trained in how to give an exciting 3-period lesson. And anytime they are not otherwise engaged, gather a small group of 3 children and give a language lesson. This quote is from a trainer back in 2015, Judith Orion, Birth to Six, a foundation for all that comes. It's a lecture that she gave. I'll just leave you with that for a minute. Just have to think about that. Thank you, Gwendolyn. Next slide. So this is the lesson study protocol. Following on from what Judy said, the question then becomes, how do we provide consistency for the children in an environment where different trainings are on offer, or people have different trainings, I should say, or no training, or what we perceive to be no training. For example, when Miss Barbara is off on Monday, will Miss Diana be able to present the material in the same way? We impose this dilemma on the children if we haven't prepared for this eventuality. We make it their problem. The lesson study protocol, and you will be given this, I know it might be quite difficult to read on the screen right now. It offers a way to work together to enhance consistency. Step 1 and step 2, I'll run through quickly because they're quite self-explanatory. The facilitator, and until your setting has this under their belt and they really get going with this, the facilitator is usually the guide, the coach. The facilitator opens the meeting, setting the focus for the week's lesson study by providing a brief overview of the lesson under consideration and where they fall in the content, the context, I can't read it myself, of the curriculum. Then step 2 is viewing the lesson. The presenter shares the direct and indirect aim for the lesson and then presents the lesson while the team observe. Participants are encouraged to take notes. So we've got the facilitator, the presenter, the participants, and the coach. But as I said, the coach is often the facilitator, and also depends on how many people you have in your setting to enact the protocol. Where we really get into it is step 3, what's going on in this lesson. And you can also see as well that each section is timed. So step 3, what's going on in this lesson? The first question is, what did you see? Each participant takes a turn commenting on one thing that they noticed in the presentation that was given. This should be a factual observation, not an opinion or a judgment. So I'm going to give an example. Let's say the team decided that they wanted to have a look at the Pink Tower. And whoever was chosen to be the presenter had presented the Pink Tower. And then the team are invited to give a factual observation, not an opinion or a judgment. I'm going to be honest here. I think this is pretty hard, especially if you're in the midst of it. The session has come at the end of a busy day, etc., etc. To hold back from telling what you think you know for sure requires some control. So then the protocol advises, if time and group, if time for the group allows, then to repeat the activity, to repeat the exercise. Excuse me. A second set of observations can then be made. So what we see coming in here is repetition. We know what repetition can do for any process, really, any learning process. Next question in step 3 is, what do you want to know more about? Beginning with, I wonder. Again, we're being asked not to make judgments or pass opinions. So if you want to raise a point, something that you don't quite understand, or something that you want to emphasize, even that you do understand, but you feel you want to emphasize for other members of the team, you raise it with "I wonder." Each participant then takes a turn voicing something that they are wondering about or have a question about. And time allowing, more repetition, a second term can be taken. This isn't a time for answers or problem solving, just wondering. So what we have here in effect is we are being called on to deny instant gratification. The gratification of either being told the correct way to do the presentation if you're unsure, or to assert the way to do the presentation if you think you know it. Instead, it's an open-ended discussion that requires consensus to close it. So we can see that the qualities of the lesson study protocol are that it raises the quality of presentations because the presenter has to present it to a group of adults. Need I say more? The children are more forgiving, aren't they? And it's a chance to practice performance, actually, because we do performances when we're doing presentations. And if we think back to what Judy Orion said about giving engaging 3-period lessons, we have to perform. The protocol raises points of consciousness because "I wonder" is raising a point of consciousness. Importantly, it builds trust. It's a safe space to wonder out loud. Exploring with the team without fear. Fear of being ridiculed, fear of being judged. It also does not allow for anyone to criticize or boast by saying, "Show me how to do it and I'll tell you how you're doing it wrong," or "My training says." It eradicates all those things. And the protocol is facilitated by the coach. And the coach has a 360-degree view of the setting because of all the other work that they do as well. The coach is the keeper of the Montessori flame, to quote Elizabeth. Next slide, please. So, as I said, the rest of the protocol was quite self-explanatory, but what you have here is the lesson study preparation. So at some time, weekly, termly, however your team decides you want to do it, you decide which lessons you want to focus on in the protocol. Again, this helps to focus the mind on what's important, the points you want to get across, points of consciousness, the direct aim, the indirect aim, the materials, the prior lessons in the sequence, and the lessons that follow in the sequence. And we can see how that would be really helpful for perhaps the untrained, knowing which lessons come beforehand and knowing which lessons should follow. The bit about common core state standards alignments are what they have to do in the US, because this program of public Montessori and Montessori coaching was devised through public Montessori, which they have in the US. And I mean, just like here, we've got the EYFS, they've got state and national standards that they have to adhere to as well. So I'm sure there's something that we could find from the EYFS that could go in those bottom 3 boxes there, if we wanted to. Next slide, please. So here is a calendar as well. So having decided, what you want to look at, or maybe you want to do it the other way around. You want to make the calendar and then go into the other document to decide, to then investigate more closely. It really does depend on you and your team's needs. Thank you, Gwendolyn. Next slide, please. So here we are, a new way to think about IC in the Montessori environment. To get to the correct knowledge, a part of the brain must shh, the part of the brain chiming in with old, naive knowledge, covering its mouth for long enough for the new knowledge to chirp up with the right answer. Neuroscience has again confirmed what Dr. Montessori arrived at more than 100 years ago. In the first plane, the work of the hands helps to develop inhibitory control. The parameters set within the materials provide a control of error, and the environment within which the child may practice helps the child to develop self-discipline. However, adults need the work of the mind to practice inhibitory control, or IC. Has anyone caught Kathy Rogers' videos on social media? And you know, they're quite engaging, and in them she explains new scientific theories, which, you know, she could be talking about Montessori completely. So what her and Michael Thomas, the other author, are saying in the book is that we need regular discoveries for our brains to be challenged, to challenge the old naive data. Coaching and being coached can do this for us. Rogers and Thomas say old knowledge doesn't just go away. It has to be persuaded to take a back seat, because as adults, we have had longer for our thoughts and actions to get comfortable. We repeat them every day, and, you know, they get grooved into our minds and they become habits, don't they? So going back to, and I mentioned in the flyer to this talk about the comment that the guide made about, you know, how will my 3-year-old know whose legs are trained and whose aren't? I hope that with these slides and with this talk, I have shown you how the tools on offer in Montessori coaching can keep everybody's legs different, but still strong. Next slide, please. So here are the references that I used, and thank you all very much for listening. And I would love to have your questions now.
Thank you so much, Diana. And thank you so much for the very, very useful tools which should help us engage with our colleagues in discussions as we find ourselves in one setting working with colleagues who have been trained in different organizations. Having a structure for those discussions is a very useful tool to keep it open, and as you say, if at all possible, non-judgmental. And perhaps it also gives us an opportunity to draw a little bit on what we have learned from the children, because I think this is in your I wonder comments, that's an opportunity to actually say, well, I wonder what it was like for the child who did all the 4 cylinders when he came to visit my nursery for an introductory visit to the nursery, and suddenly you have got a child who has never been in the environment and knows what to do with the cylinders. So I think that that's another element to the discussion, and we are always keen to put the point of view of the child into all our discussions as we go forward. I think that perhaps the best thing would be if we follow, as we have done in the past, to look at some questions and then discuss them within the groups and come together after 25-30 minutes and share what we have discussed in the groups, because it may be easier for people to have smaller groups to discuss, and it gives you an opportunity to jump from one room to another if you want to eavesdrop on what we are discussing. The questions for our discussion are very straightforward for tonight. we need to begin by identifying what it really means to us to be part of a nursery team. I think that needs to be the first discussion, because if you are in quite a hierarchical structure, the nursery team will look very different to a nursery where the structure is quite horizontal. The second relates directly to what you have shared with us. So does anything of what you have said resonate with our participants? And what is it that particularly moved you or made you think again about your practice? And the last question is, what would you like to implement in your setting tomorrow? So is there something that you feel has got enough mileage or enough power in it to be worthwhile fighting for with your colleagues, so that the children's learning would be more meaningful as we come together? So I hope that our dear facilitators for the discussions, who are Suzanne, Wendy, Marion, and myself, I suppose, Gwendolyn.
Oh, yes.
Please, are you quite clear about the questions? Thank you, everybody. And Gwendolyn, please, would you like to organize us into our little group? Thank you, everybody, for contributing to the discussion. And I wonder if Suzanne would be happy to share some thoughts about the discussion in her room.
Yes, it was very lovely. And as always, the 20 minutes just flew. And yeah, it was really interesting because we actually kind of got stuck halfway through our discussion, which was lovely. Because initially, obviously, you looked at, the understanding of the different teams that were there, where you have, we were lucky that we had people from very different settings, where you have a trained, like you said, there's a trained Montessorian lead, and the assistants have absolutely no training at all. So they're needing to be trained before they can be let loose on the environment. We had, in other cases, we had where the owner of the school is actually doing all the Montessori training because the teachers are coming in who've already been mainstream trained and are needing to be retrained. And then you've got different cohorts of people coming through. In South Africa, where we're from, our assistants are Montessori trained. So we had, quite a difference coming through there. And we then sort of started talking around this idea of having this, having a protocol and bringing that forward to the students and, or to the teaching team, to the whole team, and having everybody contribute. And we were fine until we got to the point of, so that we get to the point of agreement. And Jarek said, well, who says we need to agree? Why do we need to agree? Is there a point to having to agree? So of course, then, this is how we were taught to present materials, and this is what Montessori said kind of came to the fore. And we were then looking at, do we give ourselves as the adults the freedom that we give to the children? Because we can present an activity of everyday living to the children, or a practical life activity, and they might try their best to do it the way that we do it, but they're going to end up doing it the way that they want to do it anyway and still achieve the same outcome. So is it really that important that we must come to a point of agreement? And we didn't come to a point of agreement around the point of agreement. So, and then we had to stop. So that's where, Diana, that's where you left us.
Thank you. I'm just so happy that you considered it to that extent. This is just wonderful, because this is the stuff of our everyday lives in class, isn't it, really? On the point of consensus, I think that my understanding of it is that it's consensus within the circumstances that you're in. You might have 25 children in your class, and you as the educators, their needs, their, what conditions that you need to create for them. They're not going to be the same as in Kathy's class or Nanami's class. And so the consensus that you reach is taking your trainings and melding them so that they suit the circumstances that you're in. That's my understanding of it. So it's not to say, that we're all going to do the AMI training because that's the right way, or we're all going to do the MCI training for that's right. We're all going to do it this way because in the space where the Pink Tower lives, and because these 5 children that have just come in this cohort need this, this, and this is how we're going to do it now. That was my understanding of the consensus. The other thing is as well, when you mentioned about when staff trained and untrained, and when we're talking about the untrained, let's say when they're coming into the environment, and you said this word, and this is not a criticism because I know I've used it myself. When you said they're let loose, this is where I talk about our responsibility to one another. We shouldn't be letting them loose. We should be sending them in prepared, because they're part of the prepared environment. So, they're untrained in our sense. They're not diploma holders, but we have an obligation to tell them about the gifts, to tell them about the absorbent mind, the sensitive periods, the human tendencies, to tell them, in actual fact, the children don't really need us. They're learning in spite of us. But what we're here to do is facilitate it for them, to make it easier, to make it more relevant to the lives that they're living now and that they're going to be living. That's our obligation to each other as professionals, I think.
Yes, so it really relates to the level of induction and preparation of the staff. And as you reminded us when you joined our breakout room, Diana, that to be Montessori trained is both social and political issue, because not all of us can afford to be trained, because not all of us can pay the fees it costs to be trained. And for this reason, and also there may be local regulation that in the UK, only 50% of the staff need to be trained. And then it becomes a financial consideration by the setting. So even if we hire somebody who is untrained, we have a responsibility as the leaders of the setting to give them some level of training, so that, because the children do not distinguish between the assistant and the trained teacher, they relate to the people in the environment as human beings, somebody whom they like, somebody who smiles, somebody who provides them with that emotional support that they are looking for as they are coming from the home environment into the setting. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Marianne? Oh, Marion, sorry.
That's all right. You could call me lots of things, Barbara. I'll answer to most of them. We had a different sort of, we looked at the lesson plan protocol. We talked about that. And we thought how interesting it was to help there be some kind of commonality, because it really sort of followed Montessori principles, doesn't it, by setting up the kind of ground rules by how we interact when we're doing the presentation, but helping everyone to debate and discuss and non-judgmentally think about how they do their own presentation, seeing somebody else doing a presentation. One of our groups said that she likes to run the nursery with there not being a leader, but everyone getting a chance to be a leader at some point in time or in some particular speciality. Well, and that really resonated certainly with me. Nanami talked about her previous job where it was quite hierarchy. There was a lot of hierarchy in that environment, and she's come to a new environment and she's thinking very positive about how to try and work with everyone to help everyone to feel really valued. And we like we must be willing to take guidance if we wish to become effective teachers. We really like that. And then Adnan came in, he kept disappearing and coming in because of his connections. And he talked about different generations, because we were talking about people have been doing this job for a long time, chose the career a long time ago. And he openly admitted that he was 28. And he said he's starting to feel a little bit old-fashioned in some of the ways that he was working, and how newer people are coming in and showing him fresh ideas. And I was sitting here sort of thinking, oh gosh, there's no hope for me, because 28 was a long time ago for me. So, but I did say, and we talked about this as well, it's an attitude of mind, isn't it? It's about being open-minded to the changes. And that brought me to the inhibitory control quote. I love that. I'm going to paste that up on my wall.
It's great, isn't it?
and you can tell I'm a chatter. So, I'm going to be, there's part of my brain that's going to be going, shh, a little bit. But one of the things we used as an example was, when I was training at MCI, we would get lots of students coming in and saying, oh, but we're told we mustn't use that. We mustn't use it like that. That's not the way you use that piece of material. And I never forget someone telling me the red rods, oh no, you can't measure children with them. And I sort of just gently reminded and said, well, what are the purposes of, what are the red rods about? Just a length, so you're not going to use them to measure children. Well, doesn't that kind of not fit into the being open-minded, problem solving, using what you've got? So that was quite nice. And I also just shared the teacher that I experienced today, who is 4, who has just mastered the trinomial cube. She's just got it. And she spent, I don't know how long, and I spent a lot of time watching her, showing another little girl who isn't quite there yet. And I remember what you had said, Diana, at the beginning, the children, they're the teachers, aren't they? We can learn a lot by observing. And of course, that's what Montessori told us to do. Observe, see what's happening, and respond appropriately.
That's right. Thank you, Marion, because you also touched on that thing about leaders, about the system that you mentioned. That did you say Nanami? They had a system where everyone wanted to be a leader or was allowed to be a leader, and that's
That was Lucy. Yeah, Lucy said.
Yeah, because
that,
the thing is, because that is the thing, isn't it? In the classroom, compared to the children, we all have the role of leader or teacher put on us, whether we think we're ready for it or not. So again, you know, it keeps coming back to this idea that we have to prepare each other for it. If you're a new teacher and I'm an older teacher, let's say more experienced, not older.
Yes, I like that. I like that expression. Yeah.
It is my obligation to help to prepare you. Why? Because you are part of the prepared environment. It's no good me saying, well, you know, if you did that course or you didn't do that course, it's down to you. That's just not good enough. I am not serving the children by having that attitude.
Mm. And we can learn so much by our younger colleagues, can't we? Lucy mentioned this, that she actually has a new member of staff who she trained. And, you know, they learn so much from each other. When she's, oh, what a wonderful idea. I'm going to do that. I mean, to continually learn and strive for new knowledge is so important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to keep the grey matter going, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. Grey.
Of course, we can continue to learn from the children. I think that is an important thing, that it's not only that we learn from one another, but that the children give us an opportunity to suddenly begin to see the equipment or the materials in a different way. And that's why this idea, do we need to agree or don't we need to agree? The consensus should only link to the needs of the children in a particular cohort of children. We should be always guided by what the children need, not what we think is right. And I think that is the biggest challenge for us as grown-ups, because we do often think that we are right, and we judge very, very fast.
And you know, Barbara, where that is, I think, most stark, it's most starkly revealed, is if you have children in the classroom who have a disability. We have to then adapt the materials, don't we, to help them with their adaptation.
Absolutely. And, you know, just see what is possible for them. And often other children in the classroom will be better teachers of those children than us, because they are much closer to them and they are much more respectful of their needs. And now I come to Wendy. Wendy, have you got sharings to offer?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. We started looking at the questions, but actually we had such a lovely discussion because we had people from lots of different types of schools. But Nina said at the beginning, when we were talking about what's it really mean to you to be part of the team, I thought it was really nice. She said that the most important part was you were in the beginning of the children's nursery education. And so you really were there to support the children, the parents, and the rest of the staff. And I think that was really very pertinent. We talked about the fact that we should share our brains. We all want to guide our children to the best way possible, because at the end of the day, as we always say, the child is the most important person. Mutual respect, and everybody liked Diana's the things that taking away from her talk, because there was so much there for us all, but not to be judgmental. Particularly, everybody is trained differently and everybody has something to offer. Excuse me, particularly the youngsters coming into the nursery, they have so much to offer. Maybe they're not qualified at all, but I was working with two 18-year-olds. It was their first time in Montessori, and I was just listening to their discussion and then talking to me today. And we need to listen because they have so much to offer. We can add the Montessori as we go, but we need to respect them. And the I wonder moment, Diana, was really, really nice. And one of the schools have a critical friend observations, which was very interesting, and something I'm certainly, because I often say to people, about when we're training that to do observations on each other, and everybody goes, oh, no, we can't possibly do that. But this idea and was from Cyprus.
That is actually a whole section of the course, observations
Oh,
on each
really?
other. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, he even said it was just the first time she did it, she was cried for 2 days, which was terrible. But now they're really all into it, and it's Diana's idea of reflection, constant reflection. So thank you for your ideas. I think we've got lots to take away.
Very welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. Perhaps we should remind ourselves that for the team to work really effectively, we all need to share the vision and the values of the setting, and those values need to be embedded in everything we do, which really means that even the person who comes to cook for you, or the person who helps to clean the setting with whom the children come into contact, needs to understand the way how we look at children, how we value their contribution, and how we celebrate their achievements. The other element of being part of a team is that in order for the team to work effectively, we need to trust each other in order to be really important support for each other. And those are the thoughts that I would like to leave you with, but I will hand over to Diana for her final thoughts. Thank you very much.
Wow, this has been more than I expected this evening. I thank you all for engaging with me, for helping me to extend my thoughts around this. I do not claim the credit for this course at all. This all goes to Elizabeth Slade. To give you some slight information about her background, she works in public Montessori in the US. And she said, literally, you could have a school that was a traditional school and closes in August and reopens in, well, you know, their school dates are slightly different from ours, but let's say reopens in September, and it's a Montessori school. You can't sack all the staff. You know, you take on a few Montessori trained and you hit the ground running, sharing Montessori with people that want to learn. They don't know it yet, but they want to learn it. So,
Nice.
it's a culture. It's, you know, it's an ethos that we can very much embrace here, I think.
And that really is an interesting challenge for us in the UK, as so many Montessori schools have currently been taken over by chains of nurseries who are tempted by the word Montessori, but understand so little about what it takes to run a school that is in service of the children and their development. So thank you, Diana. If you would like to really learn more about mentoring, there are lots of very useful tools similar to the ones that Diana has shared with us today in the course. And I would really, really recommend it. Even if you have worked in Montessori for many years, there is much to learn from it. So join it next year. I hope you will run it again, Diana, next winter. And we look forward to seeing you again in February, when we are going to explore what Freud and Erikson have to offer to us as Montessori teachers. It will be an interesting session, I'm sure. So we will see you in February. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You all.